This is Audicrat Audio, where creatives break down process, discipline, and long-term craft. I'm Ab the Audicrat. Today's guest, Jake Palumbo. Jake Palumbo, welcome to Audicrat Audio, man.
What up, man? Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yep, I've been waiting for this for a while. I was talking to a few people before we started about how I was going to be interviewing you, and I feel like I already know you because of how consistent you are online with, giving your coffee thoughts. Your brand is very, open, and you're always posting about stuff about life as well as your music. So I've been looking forward to this for a while to kind of see what goes on behind the scenes, even more than what you already tell people, so to speak. So,
what up, man? I feel like I've known you forever, even though we never actually met in real life. Like we have, done some work together remotely. But that's one thing about this internet community is, you meet people and, we're all kind of, I guess, war buddies in the same, war that we're out here doing. So, yeah, man, I feel like I've known you forever.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because I'm sure so many people probably feel the same about so many other people. You follow people for a while, then you kind of get to know them, maybe follow them online. And I wonder that too. Like, I wonder how many people feel the way you do about me in terms of like, I feel like I've known this guy for a while. So that's always something that goes through my mind. I'm sure like everybody else. I know you've done a bunch of interviews, but I thought we'd really quick just start from the beginning, where you're from. I know you've been in New York for a while, and how long you've been there, and when you pretty much started doing music full time.
Okay. So I'm originally from East Tennessee. You could probably hear in my accent, like I've got a little bit of a Southern twang that won't go away. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. I lived around East Tennessee for my early life. I lived in a town called Morristown, and I lived in Johnson City, Tennessee for a while. I moved to New York, May will actually be 20 years ago. So I'm at the point now where I kind of lived half my life down south and half my life here in New York City. As far as doing it full time, I've made music my entire life because, when you grow up in Tennessee, especially when I was a kid, we didn't have things like the internet and social media and such. There was not a lot to do where I lived. And so, if you didn't find something you were passionate about or interested in or something to keep yourself occupied, you're going to get into trouble pretty quickly. So I was obsessed with music my entire life. I grew up in kind of a musical household in a way. Like my father was a musician, competently played a few instruments. My brother, actually, my younger brother is like a virtuoso guitar player. Like he's like a heavy metal shredder guy. My sister doesn't make music, but she's really good at like painting and sculpting and like visual art. But my mom and dad had a big record collection that was really eclectic. My dad was heavy into prog rock and, like Yes and Pink Floyd and King Crimson and, a lot of stuff like that. My mother was all over the place. She would listen to Black Sabbath one day and listen to James Taylor another day. But they had a really big vinyl collection that, again, as a kid with nothing to do, I would go to their crates and just start pulling records off the shelf. And as far as doing it full time, that's been since 2008. I think it was November 17th, 2008. My life kind of changed in one 72-hour period where I had moved to New York already by that point to try to pursue the music industry. But in the same week, I lost my day job. The company that I was working for went under. And in the same 48 hours that passed, I got my first paid studio session as an engineer. And I also I was hustling beats on Craigslist at the time. And I sold 3 beats off Craigslist for like $450. And so saying that to say that like that was my entry into the freelance gig economy, as they now call it. And over the next year, I tried pretty hard to find another regular 9-to-5 job, and I was not having any luck at that. And I reached this odd point to where it became easier to find artists who needed studio time and mixing and mastering and things like that than it was to try to find another traditional 9-to-5. And so they say necessity is the mother of invention. I lost my job at the same time I made my first proper money in the music industry. And from what was that, 17 years ago till today, like I've just figured it out and kind of existed. I always say it's the sum of the parts, because I do a lot of different things. I'm obviously an engineer. I have a brick and mortar studio. I do all kinds of mixing and mastering jobs for people all over the world. I'm a rapper. I'm a producer. I've got my own label that, releases titles. And the sum of all those parts, I've been able to make that a living since then. So I'm sorry, I know that was a long word salad,
But even that in of itself, I mean, being able to sustain yourself for even a year as an independent musician, I think it deserves a round of applause. But to do it for that long is even more impressive. So I think, especially I'm sure when you surround yourself with people that are doing it all the time, full time, big names, from the outside, I think that's awesome. So congrats to you on that. So that 9 to 5, was that a music job? And did you move to New York to I mean, I'm sure you moved with all intentions of music to do music, but was that a music job?
my job was not. I did move to New York specifically to do music. It was a weird time because when I first started, making and releasing music, this was just before the dawn of social media. Like we were still about maybe a year away from MySpace and things like that coming around and really getting normalized. So like back then being an indie meant, going to clubs and trying to put your flyer underneath people's windshield or like going in shopping malls and, hey fam, do you listen to hip hop? Like that kind of stuff. And
Right.
and in Tennessee, in a pre-social media world, doing the kind of music I do, especially, it was just a very easy way to starve to death. And so I felt like I kind of needed to be up here in the mecca of the music industry, in the mecca of hip hop. I'm the type of person that I tend to benefit from like being thrown into the deep end of the pool and having to not drown.
You were making beats back home for years up until that point, though?
Well, yeah, my whole life, like I'd always, from a small child, I played instruments. I got into hip hop as a teenager, bought a cheap drum machine and, started making crappy beats. And then that eventually turns into kicking mad freestyles over your beats. I was definitely making music my whole life. Right at the end of my time in Tennessee was when I first started to pursuing it seriously. But I just made a decision like I'm just gonna go for broke and move to New York and try to make this happen. So I did have a regular job. I was working at it was a website called digicombos.com. They obviously been going for quite a while, but they were a website that sold like high-end gray market digital camera packages.
Interesting.
Um, they would sell you like a Canon, some kind of high-end Canon camera, and it would be a little cheaper than B&H. But then when the customer actually get it and they see that they had a third-party warranty, that's when they find out that, they were buying gray market material. So there was a few there were a few things at play there,
Right.
but that was the only 9 to 5 I ever had that I didn't hate. Because I was allowed to work independently. Nobody really bothered me. I was a bookkeeper. Like orders would come in and I would track all the sales and expenses. And I actually built a bunch of skills at that job that later helped me running my own label. But they mostly just left me alone. I could talk to girls on back when they had G-Chat and Gmail, if you remember that.
I don't know if I ever used GChat.
But G-Chat was kind of like an AOL instant messenger that was inside your Gmail. But saying that to say, I really didn't hate that job. I didn't mind it at all. But what I had done was after I had moved to New York, I got an internship at a recording studio at Progressive Music Studios in Manhattan. And I was just a general assistant. Like I would set up sessions, roll up cables, take people's payments, go to the store, fix gear that was, needed work. And, I just tried to be the most useful assistant that I could be because by this point, I'd had a bedroom studio for years and I'd already put out pressed up a few records myself and, was on my way. And I even was a halfway decent engineer at that point. I just kind of needed to learn the rest of the job from, veterans and people that were doing it. So I
Mm-hmm.
was in a real good space where I was working my day job, not hating it, and then interning nights and weekends at the studio. And they were really cool about They were really cool about letting me use the studios in the off hours. Like anytime it was not in use, I could go in there and work on my own stuff. And so I was in a good little space. And then one day I lost my job at the same time. Like I said, I made my first real money in the industry. So
How often does it happen like that? Probably not very often. So that's pretty interesting.
that's why I don't think a lot of things are accidents. I think a lot of things, a lot of times something bad happening is a segue into something better happening.
You said you sold all three for $450, or was there $450 for each one of them?
Well, no. I sold 3 meats and got $450. They were like $150 a beat or something like that.
I mean, not bad, not bad.
And this was back when I'm pretty sure it was a SoundClick page. This, we're talking 16, 17 years ago. I think I had a SoundClick page up with like my beats at the time.
I never had one, but I know of it. I remember it. Oh, yeah.
So this guy like went through the SoundClick and picked the 3 joints that he wanted. And then I met him in the parking lot of a Dwayne Reed. And he gave me $450, and I gave him a burnt CDR with the files and everything,
which could have had nothing on them.
You never know, right? This was before we transferred.
Do you know who the guy is still? Do you
the rapper's name was Wally Dutch, and I never saw him again.
What a story! What a story to get really into it in New York. That's amazing. When I lived down there for a year about a decade ago, and I was interning at Lounge Studios, which is pretty fun.
Oh yeah, I know what Lounge is.
I used to sit in under his name's Blue. He's a engineer there. Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, so many things I learned from him to this day that really helped my mixing. I mean, I always kind of did it myself too for years and years. But until I moved down there for the year I was there and really just sat and watched, I was doing so many things wrong. So that was a big thing to be able to go down and just kind of sit with him. So Space Lab, was that something that was kind of started right when you started, doing everything full time? Did that come in time, or was that all part of the push once you?
It was always part of the vision. Like Space Lab existed back in Tennessee. It's I kind of never, and this is what I mean. Like at that time, I always say it was different for people who grew up in, say, New York or Los Angeles, because, like, say you grew up in the 90s or the early 2000s in New York City, you can literally just hop the train and go hang out outside the Def Jam building and wait for A&R to come out and pass them your demo. Like, you have access to things that people who are spread out in other places don't have access to. So very early on, I used to read a lot of books about the music industry and learned about bad record deals. And I used to read, Wendy Day had a column in Murder Dog magazine. I used to read a lot where she would talk about where a lot of things went wrong with record labels. So I figured in between that and knowing the type of music I was going to make, there is maybe, I'm not going to be booked to perform on Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve. So it's like I just saved myself the headache. Like I don't have any stories of being like hated on by labels or, getting my demo rejected, or from the very jump. I saw, and also too, like there were real life examples I could point to of people who had done it independently and built a name for themselves and built a fan base and existed completely outside of the mainstream. Like, I was into all kinds of labels like Eastern Conference and, a lot of the great East Coast, underground labels. But even being a Tennessean, like we have 3-6 Mafia and Hypnotized Minds. Right. Who were making millions of dollars independently as far back as the early 90s and very rarely having a song on the radio. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, I always kind of knew that my path was going to be more of the do-for-self path. So my goal was never really to get signed. My goal was to have my own label that would hopefully, one day get big enough that, eventually somebody would want to come by and partner up, or we get other opportunities. But I just think it's a lot better to be the king of your little world rather than being like a minuscule cog in someone else's world, or being, overlooked or forgotten, when like I can be the king of this little mound of dirt I have. So yeah, being also, I can't believe I forgot No Limit and Cash Money even. Those are hugely independent successes, making a sound that was not what was the mainstream sound. I know the underground East Coast boom bap people may not like to hear that and be like, oh, that's not real hip hop or whatever. But No Limit and Cash Money was taking an underground sound, servicing it directly to the people, and making lots of money doing so.
Yeah, a
So,
lot of
like,
money. That's the thing. Like they definitely crushed. Like there's no denying that. They just crushed back then.
yeah, I was more inspired by that type of thing. And even outside of hip hop, like my favorite musician is Frank Zappa. And,
All right. Hey,
Zappa very early on from the 70s, he went through the traditional record deals with traditional record companies and made the decision, I'm not going through this anymore. I'm going to finance my own records. I'm going to finance my own tours. I will only partner with these labels for distribution, and I will remain in control of what I do. So that just kind of was always my path.
I was gonna ask, did you go to school for music or no?
No, I didn't even go to college. What's funny is I always say that, and I have a lot of love for Tennessee. Don't get me wrong. I'm staunchly defensive of where I lived as a kid, but I always say that if I hadn't lived in Tennessee, I probably would have a doctor's degree and I probably would go to church regularly because I'm a very spiritual person, but living in Tennessee made me hate organized religion. I love learning. I love absorbing new information, but living in Tennessee made me hate the education system. So when I had fulfilled my high school obligations, I was ready to get out. Now, what happened to your point, though, when I moved to New York, by that point, I had already kind of figured out that if my music was going to be competitive and stand a chance, it needed to sound good. Like it needed to sound sonically pleasing. It needed to sound like a quote unquote professional, the same as anything you'd hear on the radio. So it was around the time I was moving to New York that I kind of put together the eureka moment of, well, if I become an engineer, my own music will sound much better. And this is a way that I can make a living while I'm trying to make Jake Palumbo get off the ground. And this is a way that I could stay plugged in with artists and labels and my network stay strong. So when I first moved to New York, I did try to go to audio school. And the problem was it's not like college where you can kind of work your way through. Like even though I was approved for the max financial aid, there was still like a difference of like $7,000-8,000 that they want right then and there. So what ended up happening was, I couldn't make audio school work, but then I remembered that when you graduate audio school, they say it's job placement, but in reality, it's internship placement. Like they don't get you a paying job, they get you an internship at a studio, and it's up to you to try to parlay that into some kind of, paying work. So I thought to myself, like, well, what if I just skipped the audio school? What if I skipped the debt? What if I skipped all this money? I already know a lot of what I need to know anyway. And so what if I just skipped that part and went straight to the internship? And so that's what I did. I went on Craigslist and everywhere I could, message boards, the Village Voice, and I started calling around to studios until I found one that would take me as an intern. So I did try to go to audio school at one point, but whether it's the business, whether it's actually producing music or any of the stuff I do, like it's all self-taught. Like it's just trial and error and making mistakes and trying to do better next time, and things of that nature. But it's, as time went on, I did get a little bit of mentorship, but I was a grown man by that point. Like early in my career, I got to work under Patrick Adams, who was the great soul, funk, and disco producer and songwriter. His music's been sampled countless times. Uh, I learned a lot working under Patrick, and there were definitely, beat miners taught me stuff. Like I've definitely, as I've gotten older and made more friends with a lot of legends and people that just really have veteran years in this. I've gotten some mentorship there, but for the most part, it's all been self-taught and learning through mistakes, and that's why I do try to give back as much as I can with as much helpful information as I can provide, because I'm one of those like weirdo psychopaths that like will just keep pressing on through the pain until I find the answer. But a lot of people get discouraged very easily. So if there's some information that I can provide to people that might help prevent their discouragement, like I said, that's part of my giving back because I didn't have that coming up.
Right. And you definitely give back. There's no doubt about that. You're always dropping gems. Daily coffee gems and more than that. It's interesting because I went to school for music, and looking back, I mean, not only was I there during the time where the music industry just went like this and everything changed and everything I learned essentially meant nothing, to your point of just going there, just doing it, not actually paying for school. I mean, that's the way. And I mean, clearly it paid off. All the books you read, you probably retained more than I did when I was in college. It's funny.
At the end of the day, and to your point earlier, a lot of careers are very short. They people can make it last a year, 2 years. I remember when, 5 years was considered veteran status. So it's very odd in that, like, I kind of start every year almost wondering how much longer this is going to last. This type of career has no job security to speak of at all. Like, I start every month with zero guaranteed dollars. Like, there is no even if I do the work, it doesn't always necessarily mean you're going to be paid on time.
Right.
There's all kinds of moving parts and things like that. But I say that to say that, like, for all this time, my employment security, for lack of a better term, is the work that I do today. And what that means is that whatever I've got to do today, whether it is mixing somebody's record, whether it's doing a feature verse for somebody, whether it is showing up to the show on time for sound check and being nice to the bartender at the venue, whether it's showing up to Ab's podcast on time and being there when I say I'm going to be there, like, all you can do is focus on the work you have to do today and do that work the very best you can and make sure that the person on the other end has a good experience with you. If you do that, your statistical chances of that, them coming back to rock with you again in whatever capacity, whether it's me coming back in months from now for episode 2 of the podcast, or whether it's a promoter who had a good experience with me, so they're going to book me again, or whether it's somebody who likes how their mix came out. And you know what? I just did 3 more songs. I'm going to send those to Jake too. Like, that's all I can do. All I can do is focus on what's in front of me today and try to make sure that the person who I'm dealing with has a good experience with me. And if I do that, I have a pretty good chance of having it tomorrow. And knock on every wood on my desk here, it's worked for a while and hopefully will for a while to come.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that way of thinking because I used to play a lot of poker, and I still follow poker. I watch it, and I read a ton of books and all that stuff. And there's a concept in game theory that has to do with expected value, and I'm not sure how aware of that you might be. But basically what it means at the end of the day is, the right thing to do in the moment might not win you the hand, but in the long term, if you do it enough, you will win. But same idea. It really is the same kind of philosophy you have where it's like, look, you just got to kind of hone in on what you're doing now. And the more I've tried to do that, the better I've been in just, amassing content and beats and not taking on too much. Because that was a big thing. I used to do way too much, like overpromise, underdeliver, because I'd want to do XYZ, but then I get sidetracked with ABC. I always wonder too, as I watch people online, get to know people, is this person making money? How is this person making money? Are they lying that they're making money, or do they not talk about it and make a ton of money? So it's always interesting to see, like, who is actually doing it, like who, and it's not about, having millions, but you make it very clear without even having to say it that you're a professional and you've clearly sustained yourself. I can see by your page, it is completely organic. You are just consistent as you can be. You are not engaging in any nonsense, and you have a brand that day in and day out, you just kind of keep at it. And a lot of people do that, but still might not get there. That's one thing that I think kind of sets you apart, because some people are good at one and not the other, but you seem to just really be, engineer full time. You're still putting out music. You're putting out content consistently. And that's what I'm really impressed about.
Thank you, man. Like that. One thing I can say is that, like, all those people that are there, it's not the most viral number, but everybody that is there was was picked up one person at a time. Like they actually want to be there. You know what I mean? Like I built that, like my audience was kind of I don't want to say curated, but was recruited, one person at a time. And to your earlier point, bro, I sunk a fortune into this music stuff before I ever turned a profit for years. But the one thing that I'll say is that even the people who do music full time for a living, no one does this for the money, because the music industry has probably the worst pay structure possibly imaginable in every way. Like, even for the people who do things professionally, like I get hired to work on a big album, right? I do the work. I then have to submit an invoice to the record label and then chase them down and remind them to pay me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is not a good structure. Like, most people go to work and they get paid on Friday and then they have Saturday and Sunday to relax. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, even the people who do treat it as a business, and I do, if this was about the money, like I would have a job with benefits and I'd get paid vacation and, like, those kind of things. I think that regardless of whether you're doing music as a profession or whether you're just doing music because it's inside you and you need to express yourself, I think we're all kind of here for the same reasons. Like, doing music full time for me is not about, making money per se. It's about not hating my existence. It's about waking up every day and not hating what I've got to go do. Like, whether it's my work or not. Like, even, if I got to go to the studio and I got to mix 2 songs and master somebody's EP or whatever I have to do, like, this is not work that I dread or, have to gear up for, So for me, it's really more about just kind of creating the world that I want to live in. Like, I wake up in the morning and my to-do list today is to work on music things. And that to me holds far greater value than, whatever my tax return says that I've made. Like, and I've been that's why I have an album called The 100,000-Air Hobo, because I've been 100,000-air and I've been just a step above hobo. And, the key is to try to find somewhere in the middle that's comfortable. But saying all that to say that, I think the common thread with all of us is that we're here because regardless of how you keep the rent paid and keep the lights on, I think we're all here because there's something inside of us that calls us to do this. Like, we live a more complete life when we make art and share it with people. And, money is something that, like, I take finances seriously because we're forced to live in capitalism. But, you can't take any of that with you when you die. Like, the absolute best you could hope for is that it's left behind to your children to somehow make their lives easier. But you're not going to die rich. So I would rather die. I saw Jazzy Jeff said something recently about dying empty. And it's basically this concept of, like, while you're here on Earth, whatever you've got to say, artistically or otherwise, get it out, say it. Like, die with nothing left to say, if possible. And, that's where I'm at right now.
On to the next topic, because I see that you pinned this one, the post about plant-based libtard. It's really impressive to see some of your streaming numbers, because I guess I didn't realize, like, how many songs you have that have a ton of streams. I mean, Soy Boy with a Gun almost has 1 million. A Lot to Unpack has over 300,000. How do you approach not only obviously releasing, but are there certain steps that you take that are, maybe outside of the norm? Or, any type of strategy to have you get those type of numbers? Or do you think that's a lot to do maybe with the audience you've cultivated and it's just a kind of everything happening at once?
I think it is the sum of the parts. But, I do have a dedicated audience. Like, I always say, I don't have casual fans. Like, very few people are going to be like, I like some of Jake's stuff, or he's okay, I like his early stuff. Like, people are either all in with me or they don't fuck with it. Like, they don't, it's not for them. So I mean, I really kind of only have dedicated listeners. When I signed my distribution deal with Soul Spasm back in 2017, my streaming numbers were not impressive at that time. They were more impressed by the amount of projects that I had put out, with the people I had worked with the release schedule I had coming up for the year or two that followed. Um, so I kind of got in there even though I didn't have great numbers. What I learned in the time being with them, and shout out to Jim Drew at Soul Spasm for, taking the time to teach me some of this stuff, was that what he taught me was that the streaming monster feeds on content, basically. And, it's like the AI data centers eating up our clean drinking water. Like streaming, there's a cap on how much money streaming can make, period. Because there's only so many people that are going to pay $19.99 a month or $9.99 a month or whatever the tiers are for membership. Like that's a finite number to begin with. So the only way to make the service more valuable to the customer is to give you more things to stream. Now, the unfortunate part of that is that's what makes how much money per stream we make go down. It's not a nefarious plot on Spotify's part to steal from artists and go, oh, no. It's just that there's only a finite amount of money anyway. The more things get uploaded, the less everyone gets paid. But that's the nature of the beast, and it's not going away because consumers like streaming. To that point, and what I was able to do to kind of work my way around the monster was, I learned that, like I just said, the streaming monster feeds on content. So a person who releases a new single, a new EP, a new project, whatever, it's somebody who does that every month or every other month is going to be shown more favor by the algorithm than somebody who puts something out every 2 to 3 years. Because unfortunately, that algorithm is not looking at the quality of your art. It's looking at how often are you giving me something I can, pitch to people. So, I did just have to start increasing the amount of music I released with more frequency. And that's kind of a slow process. It'll take a few releases to, get to where this mindless robot is starting to recognize you more. But the other thing that was really important that I learned from Jim was waterfalling singles ahead of time. Meaning, like, say you have a 12-song album that's getting ready to come out. Like, one of the odd things that has changed in this streaming matrix that we live in is the coming soon part almost gets more traction online than the out now does.
Right.
How many times, like, I'd say if anybody is watching this is artists, like, how many times have you made a post that'd be like, the album drops on Friday, y'all, and you get 200 likes? Then when Friday actually comes around, you're like, the album's out now, y'all, and you get like 25 likes. Like, that type of thing has happened to me so many times where, like, the coming soon gets like all this fanfare, and then the out now gets kind of lost in the shuffle. That's not by accident. That's by design. These social media algorithms, that's why I stopped putting any kind of out now on all platforms, link in bio. Like, they have AI, overlords that look for that kind of stuff. And they're like, well, if they click that link in your bio, you may stop surfing on Instagram. So we're going to make sure that they don't see that you have something else for them to be entertained by. I'm sorry, this is a complex topic. It goes in a lot of directions at once. But saying that to say is that waterfalling the singles. And what I mean by that is, I was just talking about the coming soon often gets more love than the out now. What we have to do is try to maximize as much of the coming soon phase as we can. So, whereas like the coming soon phase in the past might have only been 2 to 3 weeks, now it's like 6 months. So what I'll do is like say, let's use my most recent album as an example, Euthanasia for the Stupid.
And you were talking about that for a while before it dropped. I do
Right.
remember.
Right. So repetition, because there's a thing called the rule of sevens that says you have to hear something or see something at least 7 times for it to register in your mind as I know what that is. There's all kinds of things we have subconsciously seen, and it's not until we've seen it for the 15th time that it starts to register. So with Euthanasia for the Stupid, the album came out in December. My first single, Bubba Cola, came out in March. So you put that single out on streaming. You follow that up, a few weeks, a month later with the music video. By the time that music video comes out, my second single, what was that? This Old Hammer.
Real quick, were you dropping those as singles on Instagram with like their own separate art also?
Yes. Like
Okay.
I was uploading
Or
them
on streaming rather is what I
Right.
meant. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like these, and
Oh, I see it
just
here. Yeah, I remember this artwork actually now too. Bubble. Okay, so this is
and I
you
would
put the
usually
instrumental. Yeah.
add instrumental acapellas, remixes, like some kind of bonus content. The way when you used to get a single back in the day, it would usually
Right.
have
Yeah.
bonus versions. But they're basically kind of creating this juggling act where, like, I put a single out, let that rock on streaming, follow that up with a music video to reignite the interest in that song. At the same time, I'm audio dropping the second single. Then by the time, then we're doing a music video for that. So prior to the album coming out, I had released 3 or 4 singles. I guess what I'm trying to say is that by already establishing those songs with their own footprint in the streaming matrix, that by the time my album comes out, these robots have no idea what's going on. All they know is this looks familiar. And because I just put out this album that contains some songs that they already recognize from their streaming matrix, that makes the algorithm more prone to favor me. And what you want to do is try to show up on what they call release radar, meaning like if you listen to the type of similar music to what I make, when you open up your home page, I want to be one of the things that are on there on your new releases. So I guess, and it was the other thing too, like with the 1.5 million streams on Spotify or whatever it was, that took me a year and 8 months. Like, and in that time, even after the album was out, I kept working singles, making new music videos, doing every interview I could do, just literally doing anything I could to try to spread the word. And I think that's where the streaming thing goes wrong for most artists, is that they can't withstand that time period of being unheard. You know what I mean? Like, even, I do pretty good streaming numbers now, but like that still requires work, and I've got to do these interviews, and I've got to keep making music videos and content and reels and working into my other social media posts. Like, basically, I am constantly trying to find a way to remind you that this is out now without ever making you feel like I'm selling you something. It's very rarely, only a few times per year, do I ever ask for real support. And that's when, like, hey, I got a new album out, or hey, we just did a new line of t-shirts, or and all those other times I'm just trying to entertain people and say, hey guys, this is what I'm working on, y'all. But very much it's about the long game. Like, you can't work an album if you're independent. Like, if you've got money, then you can. For most of us who don't have marketing money, the only replacement for that is our sweat equity and willingness to work the long game. And the other one positive that happened with streaming is that music discovery has changed. People are discovering songs and albums and things quite a while after they were released now. Whereas, like, in the old traditional record industry, you had a finite window, and if your record didn't do this much in this time, it was considered a failure. That's really different now. Like, people pick up stuff way later. or, when, a song gets placed in a Netflix show or, something like that. Like there's all kinds of ways to be discovered after the fact now.
I want to talk about AI too, but before I do that, I really enjoy just your content in general, like the comical side that is, I think, so important to brand. I mean, brand is story, brand is uniqueness, brand is really video, showing your face. Like these are things that you kind of have to do. Like at this point in time, you have to be very special in terms of musically talented in a way where that just kind of supersedes any type of other content or branding exercise. And a lot of the times that has to do with just probably getting signed. I think if you're an independent person, I don't even see a way forward anymore without doing the types of things that you are doing. But to that point, I was going to ask, because you have a comical way about yourself. You're a funny guy. Was comedy ever something that was like a potential passion, like stand up or anything like that? And that maybe not, but just for how often you are speaking in front of the camera, like I could see you on stage doing stuff other than rapping. But I could be wrong there, but I don't know. I thought that'd be an interesting thing to ask.
I really do enjoy making people laugh, partially because I've found that like humor is a great icebreaker. And if I can make someone comfortable, you're more, if I can make someone laugh, you're probably going to be more comfortable with listening to what I actually have to say. So that's always been a part of it. I never considered stand-up comedy because I've actually known a few people who went into stand-up comedy, and I've seen that grind, and
so difficult. I
I
have so
never
much
thought I'd
respect for
say this, but I
stand-ups.
think it's far worse than the music business.
Oh, it has to be. Oh my gosh. Like it's so difficult.
Like think about this too. Like if I'm performing live at a show, whoever's in the audience may not like me or know who I am, but they probably like underground hip hop. Like like everybody in that room is at the very least going to be on the same side of a map. Being a comedian, you could have a crowd of people, and one guy is into political comedy, one guy is into dick and fart jokes, one guy is into like whatever, and then you've got this whole room of people, all who have different ideas of what is funny, and it's like make me laugh, funny man. It's one of those things that like I don't even really set out to try to be funny. I just am very big on pointing out the absurdities of the world and life. And I find that a lot of times truth is funnier than fiction. But yeah, no, the humor thing's always been an icebreaker for me. It's more so like if I can make somebody laugh, they may actually listen to what I have to say.
Right. I've always just taken a really big liking to stand-up comedy in general. Whenever I see somebody that seems like they could, I always wonder, like, I wonder if they have like the itch for that. Because that's something too. I always, I guess I find myself, I could be pretty humorous. I mean, some people might say that. And I always thought it'd be interesting to try that, but it always seems like it's incredibly difficult because you're just on stage, silence. They almost like want you to fail. They want to be proven wrong that you are indeed as funny as you say you are, where music's totally different. Like there is just much more room for error, so to speak. But it's just because and then, there's such an overlap there because you're on the stage with a mic. There's not many things you do on the stage with a mic other than hosting an event, comedy, or music. I mean, like there's not that many. So it's just an interesting thing. I kind of think like, I wonder what this person could do if they were doing this or that. But even at that point, like, do you ever make like any long form content that in a way that you do on socials, specifically for music industry knowledge? Because I think that would do so well if you did that, because you really hit on points that it's not even that people might not know, but you just kind of have a different spin on it. And it's kind of, an up-to-date modern way of thinking about old ideas too, that I think would work really well.
Back, it's been some years. It was like 2018 or 19. I had a YouTube show called How to Be Rich When You're Not Famous. And there was a few things at play. One, I had the old version of Final Cut, and editing videos was very tiresome and tedious.
Oh, it is. Oh my gosh.
And at that time, I think I got discouraged by the low view counts. Whereas like on Instagram, I was getting like, much more engagement and things like that. But not today, since you brought this up, like I've been thinking it may be time to bring back the YouTube show because, used to, Instagram would be very nice to me in the algorithm and know that my audience likes these long form videos where they learn stuff. But because that doesn't jive with their AI overlord now, and the AI changes in Instagram's algorithm cannot figure out if I'm a rapper, am I a producer, am I an engineer, am I a motivational speaker, am I a comedian? Because and so that's part of the problem, is that like part of the reason my audience liked me was because of the variety in content. You get this on Monday, you get this on Tuesday, it's different programming each day. Whereas in this new realm, they very much want you to stay in an easily categorizable box, to the point where they even want you to write your Instagram captions now containing SEO friendly keywords. And I don't know how to do that. This is one thing where I'm kind of lost, because in the past, my captions would just be, this is what I think. Here's something to make you laugh. Bomb. Hashtag Jake it till you make it. I never once considered, like, is this searchable? Like,
Yeah, I think I was seeing that like Instagram is trying to get into the Google search world in a way
yes.
where you search Instagram the way you would search Google, and to that point, having descriptions that fit that need.
So, I mean, there's that Wild West. But no, to your question, I did do a YouTube show, like a long form show some time ago. I kind of abandoned it for a while, but it may be time to bring it back, just because there is a lot of information that I do like sharing.
I was going to get into AI too, but before we do that, really quick, I just want to go over hardware, software. And to that point, it's funny. I remember you posted something recently about, and it was kind of like tongue in cheek, but you were, I don't know if you were kind of cracking on basic type of post that people put. And it was like, what kind of DAW do you use? You said something like that. And it was like before the interview. And I'm like, I'm still asking him. I don't care. I'm still asking him. But I know you would entertain me here. I see that you have an MPC. Speaking for myself before you go, I've always really been software. I mean, back in the day when I was 13, 14, I had keyboards, and it was pretty much all analog back then, but like there was no MPCs, there was no records, there was just a bunch of keyboards with preloaded sounds, and I would play the drum beat for 3 minutes on the keyboard, and like there'd be like a multi-track on the keyboard. And then I've just been pretty much strictly software for a while, but I know you play bass, right?
Hmm? I play 6 instruments poorly, as I would say.
I never got that deep into the instrument world. I mean, I play keys a little bit, and I learned a little, I learned theory and everything in college. I could see that you still use the hardware, but was there a time where you didn't, or have you always used hardware, or do you kind of use both? What do you prefer?
No, I've used software the entire time, along with hardware. So when I was first starting out, an MPC, it was the MPC 2000 XL was the MPC at the time. And back in like 2005, an MPC cost, $3,000, which at the time for me might as well have been $1 million. You were further convoluted by the fact that those MPCs came with 0 sounds. Like, you could only make tracks by either sampling, loading in sounds from a sound library, or hooking up an external module via MIDI. So it's like I would have to spend all this money and it comes with no sounds. So early on, I had a bunch of different alternatives to the MPC. I had an ASR X, I had an ASR 10 for a little while. I had the Emu MP7, if anybody remembers that. It was a purple kind of beat machine.
Oh, do you have that on Instagram recently?
Yes.
It's kind of like a square, and
the
pads. I think the pads are almost in the shape of like the keys would be, right?
Yes.
Like there's
yes.
right. Okay, yeah, I think I know.
So I had that for a while. That had great instrument sounds, but it did not sample. My original sampler actually was a Sony mini disc that had a loop feature that I stole from my old job at Sears back in Tennessee. So I would sample off the vinyl into the mini disc and then loop it on the mini disc, and then with no MIDI try to match that up to the drum machine. So
was it writing to the mini disc?
Yeah, it was. Like, I would just use that to loop the sample, and then that sample would get recorded in, and then I would make a drum pattern and try to match those up. So, but to your point, the software thing I was on very early because when I was a teenager, I was saving up money to buy an ADAT. That was the recording technology at the time, was the ADAT machine. And an ADAT could only record 8 tracks. So if you wanted 16 tracks, you needed 2 ADAT machines, and so on and so forth. If you needed 24 tracks, you needed 3 ADAT machines. And so each one of those ADATs were like $2,000, like an MPC. It might as well have been $1 million. I was saving up to buy an ADAT when, God bless the dead, my friend Mike Marshall comes to me and says, "Yo, man, I got this thing called Cool Edit Pro." He's like, "It's a software that's a multi-track recording program." And, he showed it to me. He's like, "If you can get a computer, I'll hook you up with this." So same thing. I went back to my job at Sears. I stole a computer out of the warehouse and snuck that into my Jeep when I was making a trash run. I took it home and Mike hooked me up with Cool Edit Pro. So I added the AW as far back as like 2003. So then what was a breakthrough moment for me was when I had the old version of Fruity Loops. Like, it was Fruity Loops 3, if I recall.
Same with me. That's what I started on. Digital. That's the
So
first thing I had.
the day my mind finally comprehended that all Fruity Loops 3 was a step sequencer that triggered wave files. And that's all an MPC 2000 was a step sequencer that triggered wave files. The minute I figured that out, I was like it no longer mattered that I didn't have an MPC. I'm like, wait a minute, I can just use Cool Edit Pro to trim my samples the way I would use the trim feature in the MPC. And then I sequence everything in Fruity Loops. The minute I figured that out, that was when I started really learning how to produce. Now, going back to the instrument thing, growing up in a musical household, and I can play guitar okay, I can play bass okay, I can play keys fairly decent. I was a good drummer at one point, but I haven't owned a drum set in many years. But it's like I said, I can play 6 instruments poorly. I'm not great at them, but I know how to make them work. And with things like Pro Tools, if I could play something correctly for 4 bars, then I can just
That's all you need. Yeah, that's all you need.
Doesn't matter. But saying that to say, so with Mike hooking me up with Cool Edit and figuring out that I actually had an MPC inside Fruity Loops 3, I just had to take the long way to get there. I had to edit my samples in one program and sequence them in another. But once I figured that out, I started getting to work. And then because I played instruments, I never just wanted to be like, sample drums, I'm done. I always wanted to try to add something of mine to it. And that's where playing the bass lines comes, or strings, and also too, by being able to play a counter melody to whatever sample I was using, that also helps conceal what I sampled. Do you know what I mean? So today my setup really varies. I have a bunch of different equipment, but the one thing that is constant throughout is that every beat finishes in Pro Tools. I may make something on the MPC. The MPC is dope because I like hitting pads. I like playing this drum machine like it's an instrument. I like hitting the pads. I like turning knobs. I like doing that. There's days that I'm really into that. Then there's days that, about maybe 2 years ago, I got Koala Sampler for the iPad. I love Koala, especially for doing sample chops, where it's less of a loop and more deconstructed into tiny pieces. I spend a lot of time on the trains and in transit, commuting places. So I can be on the train and hook up Skeleton at 3 beats in an hour on Koala. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I may start something on the MPC, I may start something on Koala, I may start something in Logic Pro or Reason or I still have Reason 5. Like, that's how long it's been since I've upgraded. But
Oh wow, that's amazing. Because I use
say
Reason.
that to
I'm
say
on the
that
newest one, 5. Yeah. Wow.
I, my source material comes from a lot of different places. I may start a beat on the MPC. I may start a beat in Koala. I may start a beat in Reason. I may start a beat in Logic. I may start a beat. Every so often, I've still got this 25-year-old PC that runs my Fruity Loops 3. It miraculously still works. Every now and again, I'll fire that up and do something the old way. So it's like I'll start a beat any number of ways, but they all finish in Pro Tools. Like my sequencing, and I'm also mixing the beat as I go too. Like today, it's a little better. Most people who get a track from me are probably going to come back to me to get it mixed because I've established myself as a mix engineer. But back in the day, I couldn't always guarantee that. So I wanted to make sure that if somebody was just going to take the 2-track and rap on it and then put it out without ever coming back to me, that 2-track sounded like as best as it possibly could. So like I'm also mixing the beat as I go. With to be fair, that when we get to the point of me making albums with people, whether it's my solo album or if I do one of my collab projects, the music side of it is basically already mixed by the time we start making songs. Like, I just have to record your vocals, get a mix on that, and then make it play nice with the music.
And I'm assuming that's because it's already in Pro Tools.
Yes, exactly. There you go. Exactly. Because it's already in Pro Tools.
Yeah, I've been using Pro Tools for a long time now, probably 20 years. I've been using Reason for pretty much 20 years too. I've tried to dive into other programs, but I've always found myself just kind of going back to what I know. For the longest time, it's weird. In Reason, I wouldn't bounce my stuff to audio within Reason all that often. I would kind of stay in MIDI because my mind was like, well, what if I want to like edit the notes? I always wanted to kind of have that. But I found over time, especially in the past 3 to 4 years, I really find myself bouncing to audio a lot quicker in Reason. I'm like, all right, I just need to get this printed to audio. And it could save me DSP and just kind of delete some plugins. I still don't quite stem it out and put it right into Pro Tools all the time. It's actually pretty rare that I do that before I send out. But what I do now, though, by the time I have everything formatted, I got stuff on my mix bus. It's pretty much there.
Right.
It's just a matter of, okay, what do I know I need to change once vocals are on it? So maybe I hold back on a few things. Even something as simple as just sending MP3s. I used to send people waves thinking they need to have the best quality. But at the end of the day, I talk to people, they're like, yo, dude, send MP3s. What are you doing? These are way too big. That is smart to do, just having Pro Tools, especially if you're going to mix it. Just have it there. And that's the same with me. There's certain people that I'm sending beats, I know I'm going to end up mixing it anyway. So it's best if I just stem it out, throw it in Pro Tools just to get it there.
Like I said, it always depends. Like some beats I'm sampling more, some beats I'm playing more, even on the sampling side. Sometimes I may be finding loops. Sometimes I may be chopping into little pieces and playing, something far removed from its original sequence. I just have tools. I guess what I'm trying to say is that depending on what mode I'm in, that's what I'll gravitate towards. If I want to super chop a sample, I'll probably pick up Koala or the MPC. If I'm dealing more in loops and live instruments, I may pull up Logic or, something different like that. There's some beats I've made entirely in Pro Tools.
In a perfect world, I would only use Pro Tools, really, because I think it's by far the best program to edit audio in.
Yeah.
Reason has some cool features to edit audio, but it's not nearly what Pro Tools is. There are some things in Pro Tools that I don't have that makes me still always want to use like a program like Reason. I've kind of dabbled in Ableton a little bit more recently too. That's a really dope program, but I'm just very stubborn with I always just fall back. But I mean, to your point, I mean, yeah, whatever works. I mean, if something chops better. I mean, I've had MPCs too, but I really didn't get into them. I'm a keyboard and mouse guy. Like I need a keyboard and I need a mouse, but I also can see how even the chopping in MPCs, it's amazing how you can chop in MPCs. It's like the way to do it. Cause I never used you said Koala. I've seen it online, but I've never actually used it myself. Maybe I should download that and just mess around with it. Cause like I've seen a lot of people, I think Rob Vick posted a lot of videos with it, but it looks dope. I mean,
it's only $5, or at least it was when I bought it. The best $5 I've ever spent. Like, even then, like I don't finish on Koala. Like I'm just importing the sample, making all my chops, making patterns, and then I'm exporting those WAV files and sending them to myself, and then I'll go actually finish the beat in Pro Tools or program drums or add instruments or whatever I'm doing. But yeah, it just depends on what mood hits me when. I'll pick up a different tool.
Plugins. So I was going to pick your brain about plugins. So, I mean, I'm assuming you pretty much mix in Pro Tools, right? Like if you're mixing a
Yeah,
song
yeah.
with Pro Tools
Mhm.
for years, up until probably COVID, all I used was stock plugins. I didn't even own, I think maybe I had some like Waves demos for a while there, but I was so green on like just understanding what's out there, knowing what companies even existed. And another thing too, back then, I remember it being a little complicated, at least to me, needing an iLock and like how you properly license your plugins. And it kind of, I think I just kind of shied away. I'm like, I'll just use what's in here. And then come 2020, and I was, just making more beats. Obviously, COVID, I got laid off, so I was home, making a lot of beats and content. So I downloaded some Waves, and then I downloaded, Slate plugins, and then I kind of went on a frenzy, and it was the only time this ever happened. But since then, I've honed in, and I really just there's a handful of companies that I really like. Isotope I use a lot. Really like Slate plugins, and I really like Waves. But just to offer up one of my go-tos. So I'd probably say the plugin I use more than anything is the F6.
Mhm.
I use the F6 on everything, on all my drums, even on buses, but really to shape drum sounds. I love the dynamic controls, and it's just so easy to use and it's cheap. It's only $25. So that's just a go-to for me. But what are some of your go-tos? Because I know we chatted a little bit on the phone. I know you were just mentioning some Waves plugins you use.
So for starters, it's worth mentioning that today, in the year of our Lord 2026, I am still working. Like my studio, the Space Lab, is running off a 2010 Mac Pro that is
Wow.
still running, I believe, OS 10 Snow Leopard.
Really?
We
Wow.
cannot get any updates anymore. I can't even watch YouTube on that computer because to upgrade the Flash plugins requires updating the OS, which is not possible. So I'm just saying this. I just want everybody to know that, like, I am doing all this work for all these artists on some seriously outdated equipment. And I think there's times if some of the people who hired me for these jobs knew what I was working on, they might have reservation. But I'm saying that to say that, like, I'm still using Pro Tools 10 on a 2010 Mac Pro, with you can't even get system updates for it anymore. But with that said, I have approximately, on the studio computer, there's approximately maybe about 150 to 200 different plugins. I would say that all of my work is done using the same 25 plugins. Like,
Right.
a
Yeah, I'm
lot
probably
of
I'm
the
probably the
stuff,
same, maybe even less, but yeah,
probably it might be like 17 or 18. Like, uh, so saying that to say that there's a lot of plugins on my computer that just sit dormant and don't get used because it's just the same. It's just a different version of the same thing. With that said, to your point earlier about stock plugins, to this day, some of the plugins I use are Pro Tools stock plugins.
Yeah, there's a couple I
Um,
still use that are stock too. Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, there's some that like they just work fine, and there's no reason to go any deeper there. I do love Waves. I do use a bunch of Waves stuff. I have the Waves Mercury bundle.
And that's like the main bundle. That has like everything, I think, right? Mercury is like one of the top.
It was the everything bundle in 2015 or whatever year I got it. Yeah, it was the everything bundle back then. I would say my favorite plugins out of that bundle are definitely the CLA 2A, the Chris Lord LG LA2A emulator. That goes on just about every vocal that I mix. I really like the Renaissance Axe. I like the SSL stuff on Waves. I like the API stuff on Waves.
I like the
Um,
550 A and B. I
yeah,
use that
550
on.
is
I use
dope.
that to brighten stuff up a lot, especially on the higher frequencies. I really like using those for that.
Those are good. The EQ. So I have the Fab Filter Pro Q2. Which again, I think they're on like Pro Q 5 or 6 now, but that Fab Filter Pro Q is incredible.
Yeah, it
Not
looks so
because it
good. I
does
want to just
anything
get it one
fancy.
day.
Not even, it's literally just an EQ program. It's not even that it does anything fancy. It's that you have so much control over your curves and it's just super easy to dial everything in. If I were stuck on a island with only 5 plugins,
There it
I
is.
would
That's the
say
question.
I
Yeah.
need the CLA2A from Waves. I definitely need the FabFilter Pro Q. I use my favorite reverb is called Reverb, like reverb with a B on the beginning. I don't even think they make reverb anymore, but that would be my go-to reverb. The Oxford limiter is really good on like final masters and stuff like that, or whenever you need to, give something some oomph.
In 2020, for me, it was just the first time I really actually had like third party plugs, which is crazy to think. For so many years, I had like almost nothing outside of that. And really, what that taught me was, I think going through that once is good because then, like you said, there is a lot of the same thing in all these bundles. But some of them might fit your style more. And then you're really never going to know that unless you kind of just dish out some money and figure it out. Because there's so many channels that talk all this stuff about, and there's endless marketing. Obviously, buy this will make and I'm sure your feed is just endless marketing with all this companies buy this new plugin. It's endless. But I really love Slate stuff. I really like Isotope. I use a lot of Slate plugins. I love they have great saturation modules that I really like.
Isotope. I forgot about Isotope. I do use Isotope.
To lead into the final topic, AI. Isotope has really amazing AI features that I've leaned into quite a bit. One of the things they have in their music production bundle is the RX. I think it's just called RX, but I have RX 11, which is, it's like the repair kit. And that was the first thing that I've ever used where it dropped out stems. It could, de-reverb, de-click, all that stuff. And that's a really handy tool to have. So that's a big reason why I got that bundle. And, there's a lot of AI in there, obviously, the dropping out of stems if you need them. There's a lot of things that do that now. Serato Studio, Serato Sample. I found that using it for production is, I don't know, it's very hard for me. I've tried to go on some of these sites, and I know you spoke on one of them recently. And even on the big ones, which we'll leave, we won't be naming these sites necessarily unless you want to. I'll try to get samples out of them. And maybe I just haven't tried enough, but I don't find that there really is much I'd ever really sample, like in terms of finding these AI samples. But I mean, I think for most people, especially that have been doing it for a while, a lot of it's in the hunt. Even if you're going on YouTube, that's more of a hunt than AI. I try to find records sometimes too, but I'm not a big record guy. I don't really collect records. Isotope has some good modules that will kind of get you halfway there. And it kind of teaches you too, almost like this is what it does. Like this is what we did with EQ. This is what we did with stereo imaging. I know you talk about AI quite a bit, but do you utilize AI, at least in mixing? And maybe you don't. I mean, I can tell you kind of have your way of doing stuff and whatever works, works. But how do you incorporate AI in your content and any type of music, or do you at all? Or maybe do you see yourself doing it in the future more if you don't? And I know this could be a whole nother episode, but just to give us a brief.
Well, let's see. In my mixing, I don't use AI at all because my equipment is so old. Like I can't even run the new version of Waves. Like, you know what I mean? So it's certainly not going to handle, so I don't use it in mixing at all. I have basically no interest in using it in my art. However, I was forced to, in the smallest capacity, with this last album. A lot of people may know that like my solo albums begin with this British sounding narrator where he's like, hello and welcome to whatever the name of the album is. And then, for the next couple minutes, like this British narrator gives this really absurd rundown on what Jake Palumbo has been up to since we last spoke. I'm saying that to say that from the time I brought that character out in 2019 up until it was time to finish this most recent album, people were always confused. Like, is that a real voice actor? Because there's something kind of odd and weird and strangely robotic about his diction. So it wasn't an AI voice generator because that didn't quite exist yet. What it was a TTY software that was used to help deaf people communicate on the phone. So like a deaf person would type what they wanted to say, and then this robot voice would translate it. And it would come out sounding kind of human, but kind of not. So me being the cold-blooded psychopath that I am, I made this guy my narrator on all my albums. So the problem I ran into was when it came time to put this most recent album out, I'm like, oh, well, we got to go back and make the narrator voice. Let me start typing up the script. And when I go to do it, the voice that I had used to use, the company had taken that voice away. Like they didn't offer it anymore. All you had was like a woman's voice, or like it was a British sounding guy, but it sounded different than the voice that people have come to know and recognize from my album. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't. Oh, no.
So this was just all web-based? This was just a web-based kind of thing?
Yeah, it was a web-based program that, like I said, it was used as TTY software so that hearing impaired people could communicate on the phone. So I emailed the company like, this sounds really strange, but I've been using this voice on a creative project for the last 8 years. And how much money can I pay you to give me access to this voice? And they wrote back just like incredibly disinterested, like, yeah, we took that voice away. This is what we've got now. Sorry, goodbye. Like they weren't interested in my money or anything. So I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? So I had to employ 11 labs. What I ended up doing was I ended up going back to one of my previous albums. I pulled up the session file to one of my album intros. I just muted the music and bounced an acapella of this robot narrator. And then I signed up for a 1-month subscription to 11 labs. I put in the acapella of this old, hearing software that I was using. And then I used the 11 Labs AI to basically voice model this. And it came out fine. If you listen to the intro to Euthanasia for the Stupid, it sounds the same as all my other album intros did. Although we do address the topic on that intro. I have the narrator talk about how when I was first introduced, I was but a, low technology hearing impaired software. Today, all YouTube videos have a voiceover. So that's why I am contemplating committing suicide on the next album. And now Euthanasia for the Stupid. So we did address that a little bit because now, like, I can't even use the old method. It's like I have to use AI modeling now to kind of get that same voice. So saying that to say that that's the only time I've used AI like in my heart. I don't think all AI is inherently bad. I think AI should be being used to like read through years of medical research to cure cancer instead of putting graphic designers and background music composers and I do think that there very much is a faction of people that want to use this technology to never have to pay creatives again. And I think a lot of creatives are being gaslit into saying, oh, well, it's a tool. We just have to adapt. But like also, you can't completely shut it out either. Like, and this is what I mean is that like, okay, I found myself in a bind where the thing that I normally do creatively, I can't do it anymore because for whatever reason, this random software maker said we're not making this product anymore. So I had to use 11 labs to model what I had already established creatively, and it worked out fine and nobody noticed. And that was, I don't think all AI is inherently evil, that's bad. I think most of it sucks. I think most of it is uninspired slop. My personal grudge against it is that, like, when I was a kid and a teenager, like, I was a displaced nerd who was not good at sports. And so, like, me being good at music things was, like, the thing I found for myself that was my redemption that made me cool. And now what I don't like about AI is that for all the people who were not willing to go through the lonely practice of learning how to make music or make art, they suddenly are like, oh, hey, I can do that now without having to go through the tough part. I don't like that.
Sure.
And I do think that I think the main mistake most people are making with AI is that they're only viewing it from a content creation standpoint. They're not viewing it as like, this is affecting our clean water. This is creating a surveillance state. This is going to be used, to convict people of crimes that they didn't actually commit one day. Like, I think that we've been somewhat gaslit by the make your content creation easier thing, that we're kind of forgetting some of the lesser sides to it.
No, there is a huge underbelly that people refuse to think about, or like you said, are gaslit to not think about. To your point about companies that are potentially seeking out like just cheaper pennies on the dollar AI music for shows, I will speak to something where my first interview, it's a friend of mine who is part owner in a licensing company, which I'm a part of. I could see their briefs and, what companies are looking for. And he's basically saying that pretty much all of them, at least the ones that he's working with, almost none of them want AI beats or AI music, which is a good sign.
Really?
And I thought that was interesting when he told me that too, because you almost think, why wouldn't you? If you're a big corporation, if your whole thing is bottom line and making profit, why wouldn't you utilize, one of these sites to generate you things that cost you nothing? I spoke about this on my last podcast. It's only a matter of time before these record companies just buy it up. Like, why wouldn't they buy it up when it's in such competition? Because if they're in competition, they're the ones with the money. They're going to come in, offer them a huge chunk, and then that's it. And then you'll probably see more of them. But if they're in competition with AI artists, they already own half of Spotify. Why wouldn't they come in and just start buying these things? So yeah, that's about it, man. I really appreciate you coming on. If you want to take a second to, plug anything coming out, socials, website, Space Lab, anything like that?
For sure. So I just released a new solo album about a month ago. It's called Euthanasia for the Stupid. 14 tracks, all self-produced. I rap on the whole thing. It's got features from Curious, Psycho Les from the Beat Nuts, Q Unique, E Smitty, and Greasy Amin. So I got a new solo album out. I recently formed a duo with Craig G called Anti-Social Superheroes. We have a 12-song album that is already recorded.
Did you post about that?
What's up?
Did you post about that with Craig G? I want to say I heard that.
Briefly,
Maybe not.
a few months ago, briefly we did. But yeah, we finished the album. It'll be coming out this year. It's got that. Got a lot of other. Me and Elvis Sensei are doing a sequel to Solving Cases. Always working on something. I got a bunch of projects coming out this year where it's me on the beats and somebody else on the mic. You can find me at jakepalumbo.com. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, at Jake Palumbo. I'm always working on something. So yeah, just tap in and stay tuned, and I will always keep you in the loop with whatever I got going on.
Yeah, man, this was great. A lot of fun. I hope to do a round 2 at some point in the future.
For sure.
Still trying to figure out what these round 2s are going to be like, but we'll figure something out. I'd like to have you back. That was fun, man. That was fun. Always a pleasure. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. Until next time, peace, Jake Palumbo.